Hello, so this is part 2. If you've seen part 1, that covered my childhood and being fat. And a disclaimer, I am going to use the word fat because it's what I've heard my whole life. It's what people have described me as and what I've described myself as. So it's part of my healing, so it's not to offend anyone, but it's my reality. So in this series, I am going to discuss being pregnant and fat. Now, I first fell pregnant with Caitlin when I was 19. Me and Kieran hadn't been together very long, so she was a bit of a surprise. And I was doing my nurse training at the time, and I remember being so shocked that I could even fall pregnant, because at this stage, I think I was about 19 stone. So I sort of come to the terms that I may potentially not ever have children because of my size. So she was a happy surprise, bless her. And from the moment I found out I was pregnant, really, I was under a consultant-led pregnancy, is what they classed it as, because of my size. So I was classed as high risk. Luckily enough, at that point, I had no other sort of medical conditions because I was only 19. It was just the fat that was causing the problems. So around, I think I was about 18 weeks pregnant, they said my blood pressure kept going up. So I attended the consultant. I had no midwife. It was all consultant led. And he said to me, you won't be able to have a natural birth, potentially because of your size. We can't monitor the baby and you safely, and we don't want to put your body under that extra pressure. So I was like, I'll do whatever I need to do to get her here safely. At this point, I knew she was a girl. And then from 20 weeks, we went away for the weekend to Kieran's nan's. And I remember feeling really unwell, banging headache, everything was swollen. I felt quite short of breath. So when we returned, I went to the hospital, and that's when I got diagnosed with preeclampsia at 20 weeks. And normally it's a condition that develops sort of later on in pregnancy, but from 20 weeks I had it. And it made, as I was getting bigger, so you didn't really know I was pregnant until probably about 25, 26 weeks. Well, even then you didn't really know, because it was just, I was so overweight and it was hard to even tell. And they admitted me to hospital. I was in for about 3 weeks for loads of testing. They got me on loads of medication. And at that point, he was like, we need to do weekly blood tests, weekly scans to keep an eye on you and baby, and she will be delivered early. So basically go home and prepare. And I lasted, I think it was about 2 weeks, and then I was back in again. And each time I used to have to go up to the day assessment unit, and the trace that they used to put on her, on my stomach, it would never meet, you had to meet certain criteria. So many kicks per movement. But because my fat was in the way, I couldn't feel her move. So I was like, is that a movement? Is it not? And then the monitor would fall off because the bands were so tight round me, or she would move. So every time the midwife was like, you need to wait for the consultant, and it wouldn't be my consultant that would review me. And they were like, no, we need to keep you in. So every time it was like a running joke that I was going to be in for a few days. And it got to, that was pretty my reality up until about 28 weeks. So from 20 weeks to 28, I was going weekly, and then most of the times having to be admitted overnight. They would check everything, discharge me again. And then when I was 28 weeks, I was admitted, and the consultant said to me, this is it now, you're in until you deliver her, strict bed rest. I was like, but I've got like 12 weeks to go. He was like, sorry. And I was in the middle of my nursing, so I had to defer a placement. He was like, it's too unsafe to let you out. So I was watching all these mums come in with their baby, and I was just sat there trying to keep her and me safe. And there was a scan. He'd done a really extensive scan at about, I was 32 weeks. And he was like, we're delivering you tomorrow. we're giving you an emergency section. She's not getting the oxygen. We can't monitor her safely as she grows bigger. She's safer to be out than in at the moment because we're at risk of losing you and her unless we act now. We're going to take you around to the neonatal department so you can see that. And I remember walking through with Kieran and there was all these really premature babies on like life support machines and all of that. And like, I'd never had a baby before. So this, in a way, it was a blessing because I didn't know how bad it was because I hadn't had anything to compare it to previously. And the next day I had the emergency section. She was taken straight from me. I literally saw a glimpse of her. She was taken straight to neonatal intensive care. She was put on, lucky enough, thank the Lord, she didn't have to go on a ventilator because they gave me steroids the night before to try and help her lungs. But lucky enough, it was just a CPAP machine. So it's basically like positive pressure, but she had a mask on and everything. And I went back to the delivery suite and Kieran and my mum were there and I said to Mum, please go round and see her just to check she's okay. And Kieran, he was young at the time. I don't think he realised how bad it was. And I was a bit oblivious as well. But they went round and they took a photo for me. And that's the first time I saw her was on a photo, really. And I delivered her, I think it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I finally got to see her about 9 o'clock at night. They wheeled me into neonatal on the hospital bed. It was so embarrassing. And I got to look at her in the incubator and I didn't get to hold her for at least a week. It was just sort of holding her hand through the incubator. And she was so lucky and we were lucky because she didn't need that much support. It was just help breathing and sort of nutrition really to get her to feed and just to get a bit stronger. But because of my size, I couldn't breastfeed her. Like my boobs were huge and a nipple was pretty much the size of her face. She was tiny. She was £3.9 when she was born. And at that point, I was like, my weight has caused this. And now my daughter was fighting for her life because I couldn't safely hold her because they couldn't monitor me because of my weight. And she's done really well. Even now, she's like, you wouldn't even think she was premature, but she still struggles really badly with her asthma because her lungs were not matured enough before they delivered. And there is guilt around that. But, you know, that's our reality. Then when I was 25, 26, I had Logan, so he's 8 now. So yeah, 28. We tried for Logan and lucky enough, I fell pregnant again, which was a huge shock. I did do the 1-to-1 diet for a short period before I fell for him. And it took us 8 years to properly fall for him because I was like, I just can't go through what I went through with Caitlin. And Kieran was like, if we don't do it now, we're never going to have another one. The age gap's going to be too big. So that's when I was like, okay, we'll try. Couldn't fall. And then done the 1-to-1 and lost about 3 stone. And then I did fall pregnant, but I didn't obviously go up the maintenance steps because I was pregnant. And his pregnancy was a lot better. They treated me for preeclampsia from the word go. Again, it was consultant led. And then he came at 38 weeks, but I was in from 34 weeks on bed rest because of the preeclampsia. And he was £7.9. So it was a totally different birth for him. And it was a section again, because of my size. It was just too unsafe for me to have a normal delivery. So yeah, the pregnancies were not easy. As soon as I had him, Kieran went and got the snip because I was like, I can't go through that again. I've got my 2 babies and I'm so thankful to have them. It wasn't an easy pregnancy, both of them. And the the obesity did play a massive part and dictated both those pregnancies. I couldn't do the normal things like I didn't have a bump, it was just more fat on top of fat. I didn't have my perfect pregnancy, my perfect birthing plan, because there was no point in having a birthing plan because it was whatever was going to keep me safe and them safe. So yes, of course I've got regrets, but I've got my 2 babies and they're safe, they're happy and they're healthy. And the guilt is there, but I try and sort of rationalise it and think, well, at least I've made the changes now so I can give them the life that I want them to have, really. But yeah, follow for part 3.